Hello everybody, today we are going to be revisiting the lore of the BTD series. And this of course has nothing to do with the fact that my video on it blew up. Anyway, it wasn't that long ago that I talked about the lore of this series, but I've learned a lot about random details, inconsistencies, and strange connections in this game series since then. To be honest, the more I've learned, the less of a clear conclusion I have, and the point of this video isn't to offer one. Instead, it's a look at why there are so many conflicting theories, and why we will most likely never have one that fits all the evidence. And as a quick side note, I understand that most people aren't taking the lore too seriously. I'm just treating it seriously as a setup for the rest of the video. Part 1. The first thing to talk about is random details. Basically, anything in the game that seems like it could say something about the lore, or have some grand story behind it, that doesn't. And first of all, let's talk about Roswell. And yeah, they mention Roswell in the BTD universe. In real life, Roswell is a city in New Mexico. Once something crash-landed there, so some crazies decided to pretend that it was a UFO. Officially, we were told a weather balloon crashed. Now we've been told it's some sort of surveillance balloon. According to author B.D. Gildenberg, it's, quote, the world's most famous, most exhaustively investigated, and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim. In Bloons Super Monkey 2, though, it's brought up when they introduce the shielded balloon, which is exactly what it sounds like. The game basically says, the balloons took some alien tech from Roswell. Now they have shields and take more hits to pop. Plus, there's also a Roswell-themed map with a UFO in it in BTD5. So, is there a grand story of an alien invasion or a monkey government trying to keep extraterrestrial life a secret in BTD5? No. It's just a sort of reference to an event that's now famous in the real world. Or famous among conspiracy theorists, at least. On its own, none of that seems like it matters. But compounded with everything else I'm going to talk about, it tells us something somewhat disappointing. So what's next? The lightsaber thrower, or the Jedi monkey. Basically, in BTD4, the final upgrade for the boomerang thrower makes the monkey look kind of like a Star Wars character, and it replaces the boomerangs it normally throws with a double-sided lightsaber. The description of the upgrade in BTD4 is, quote, lightsaber slices through anything and everything, up to 70 balloons at once, end quote. So, is there some Star Wars-esque story in the BTD universe? Or is there lore behind how monkey scientists and or magicians created a lightsaber? No. It's just a fun pop culture reference. Or take something in Bloons Monkey City, one of the only games that gives us even the beginning of lore bits. Well, there's a sun temple stage described as consecrated ground, but there's little to nothing we're actually told about it. Or, there are multiple different maps throughout the BTD series that appear to be war battlegrounds. Plus, there's an entire group of monkeys in BTD6 called military monkeys. And, to top it off, there's a hero in BTD6 called Captain Churchill, who says the sun god fights on the side with the best artillery. So, does all of this together imply that the monkeys went to war with each other? Or was there, a monkey D-Day or a monkey Cold War? We have no idea, because the series doesn't ever go any deeper into that. Basically, even on the rare occasion that we get a hint at something, it's always a reference, or a throwaway joke, or a random detail that sounds important, but will never be brought up again. All we can actually be sure of is that the monkeys fight the balloons, and have a solid grasp on science and magic. And we know that the balloons, or whoever is controlling them, is intelligent. That's it. Everything beyond that is speculation. You could make the argument that the humans were wiped out and the monkeys took over. You could say that the monkeys are an alien species. You could claim that the balloons are actually the good guys of the series. Basically, the small details in this game could be used to say literally anything, because there is no intended lore or narrative in this series. Part 2. No intended narrative. I think most people in the BTD6 community would agree with me that there isn't an intended narrative in this franchise, but I want to quickly fully prove that before I move on. Basically, on Ninja Kiwi's website, They have a blog of sorts where they answer questions people ask. It's really fun, and not very many people do it as of now, so I got one of my questions answered first try. Anyway, there are 2 official statements from NK on their Q&A that I believe to prove my point. First, someone asked, "Is there any intended lore? Or did you not plan to add any lore and then choose to introduce lore later? Or is there no lore at all? I would love to know because I've been having some crazy theories about these games and would like to know if they were intended." End quote. And NK, or Ninja Kiwi, replied, "What's lore?" This is obviously a joke answer, and I'm not that mad that they didn't go into an in-depth explanation of the lore of this series. But it's intentionally elusive. They didn't really confirm anything, even when directly asked. And for good reason. This is where the second quote comes in. When asked, "Will you add a story mode or something similar to that? It would be fun if there are multiple stories which introduce lore and make the player understand game mechanics, and maybe you can add more stories every few updates." NK replied, "We love stories, and lore too, and we're always tempted. But the community comes up with so many great stories that we'd worry to put a damper on that." End quote. This is where the story gets interesting. NK isn't, as you'd expect, leaving the lore out for the sake of being professional, but because, as they said in this quote, they've seen how much the community enjoys theorizing about the series, and they don't want to end that by making something official to replace it. So, aside from small hints and gags, they don't really put lore in the game. Part 3. Why does the community want to explore the lore in the first place? I think the most obvious answer to this question is just for the meme. No one is really taking the lore that seriously, partially because there is no real narrative. The premise of the monkeys and balloons, but misspelled, in an all-out war is intentionally ridiculous. If we look at this image here, as an example, there are a dozen questions that instantly come to mind. Where did these monkeys come from? Why do they hate the balloons so much? How did they get all these magic powers? And who's inflating the balloons? None of these questions have a real answer, though, and they probably never will. And that's the appeal. It's a challenge to fit everything we've seen in these games together to create one singular narrative. To put it simply, the BTD series doesn't have any lore, and that's why it's so fun to try and give it some. I'd like to know if any of you have a different take on this, but I think this is the most obvious answer. There obviously isn't any big story that NK was trying to tell from the start, and the clues we have as of now are unclear at best. So I think that the real reason, other than people just memeing, is that it's sort of a fun, ridiculous, open-ended challenge to try to make one clear story that fits all of the evidence. I guess I don't have that much more to say, but before we wrap up, there's one more question I want to explore. Despite all the vagueness and conflicting information, if we had to choose one definitive theory for the lore, what would it be? Obviously, we know the end result will be somewhat objective, but what is the closest we can get to the correct answer or story? Well, that's what I'm going to look at in Part 3. In my Trilogy of Lore videos, I first gave a very rough overview. And here I talked about why no answer will be perfect. And in the grand finale, I will try to take everything I can find into account, making one last dive into the question of lore in this series. It will be a true analysis. And if you're interested, or you like the sound of that, you could obviously check back here, or maybe you could potentially, hypothetically, possibly subscribe or something. Did I sound casual? But before you go, I want to quickly mention that if you liked this video or anything else, and maybe you want to be in one of my videos, maybe you personally would like to appear on my channel, I want to tell you that there is a way to do that. I'm going to be making a stop motion very soon. It's long, it's serious, and it's probably going to be a feature-length thing that hopefully is, like at least an hour, and you can be a voice actor in it. If you want to be a big role, that's okay, or if you just want to have a couple, sidelines, or, be a small side character. Either way, it's okay, and it's going to be awesome, so hopefully you can join us for that. But with all of that out of the way, all I want to say is that I hope you didn't not enjoy this video, and I will not see you in a bit.